And welcome to episode number 17 of the QCast. I am Bob Quillman, and I'm really excited today, also a little bit sad to be joined by somebody who's been a huge part of Division III across several fronts, but is leaving Division III. And that is the head men's basketball coach of the University of St. Thomas Tommies, Johnny Tower. Coach, like I said, it's a little bit sad here in that we've known you so well as a huge member of Division III, and we'll talk about why you're leaving Division III. But thank you for doing this, and how are you doing?
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here, Bob. I appreciate all your support of Division III athletics over the years, and it's certainly I was a student athlete at St. Thomas for 4 years, and this will be my 22nd year coaching here. And so even though I feel relatively young when I hear those numbers, I'm not. And Division III has been a huge part of the fabric of our institution, and we're also incredibly excited about the next journey. But certainly the memories we have, and excited to go down memory lane a little bit with you today. There's something about Division III, the purity of it, and I think that that's not lost on us as we move to Division I. Is how do we maintain all that outstanding balance between academics and athletics while doing it at the Division I level.
And I believe that the move to Division I, and I could be completely wrong on this, but I saw somewhere that like July 1st, 2021 is sort of the effective date of your move to the Summit League. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think there are probably different points in there. I mean, our recruiting has essentially been under Division I rules for the past year, and so it's been interesting because we've been operating under Division III playing rules the last season, but Division I recruiting rules. But I think according to the NCAA, July 1, 2021, with fall of 2021 being the first dates of competition is when it's official.
Well, the timing's good then, so we can catch you here right in the waning month or two of your time in Division III. And let's just a couple things. First of all, Coach Tower is not just a guy that coaches basketball there. So Coach Tower is a tenured professor in psychology at the University of St. Thomas. You have a PhD in social psychology. And so your role at your alma mater here is one that goes well beyond basketball coach.
Well, yeah, it's been an interesting journey to say the least. I was sort of not a wayward student, but I was a curious student who had no clue what I wanted to do. And my sophomore year, we were sort of at that point where you've got to choose a major. And I took 3 classes, and I just said, whichever one I enjoy the most, that's what I want to do. And that sort of became a theme, I think, for my life. I'm not a brilliant guy by any means, but I found that if I do things that I'm passionate about and surrounded by people who have really good values, special things happen. And so, that led me on a path to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin, where I got my PhD. And I knew I wanted to be a coach, but I also recognized how challenging coaching is. And so I thought 2 things. One is the sort of social psych and sports psych background would be helpful. And 2, it allowed me to pursue a different career where if frankly coaching didn't work out, and we all know lots of people who coach for a few years and for any number of reasons, the hours, the pay, etc., they do something else. And so I was really blessed that I got to teach full-time in psychology, and I was an assistant coach under Steve Fritz for 11 years. And it's just been, to get to work at your alma mater, teaching psychology, coaching basketball, and studying intrinsic motivation. Essentially, I get to live every day. The adage, if you find a job you love, you'll never have to work a day in your life. I don't ever feel like I'm coming to work at St. Thomas.
Yeah, it's an amazing combination. I believe the 2 of them fit very well together. And let's just talk about the basketball side for a second. This was your 10th season as the head coach of the Tommies, your alma mater. And here are some mind-blowing statistics out there. Your record in those 10 years, including this year's 7-0, 218 and 50. That's an 81% winning percentage. Your MIAC record was 156 and 29. That's 82%. You've won 9 MIAC titles in those 10 years. You have a 15 and 6 NCAA tournament record. You won the 2016 Division III national championship. And I believe one of those, or both of the trophies are behind you that the Tommies have won, I believe. Is that the official hardware that I'm seeing there back there?
A couple pieces of hardware, yeah.
That is maybe the best Zoom background of all time. I think that kind of takes the cake. But Johnny, that is an incredible 10-year span or run at St. Thomas. Just talk about just high level what this journey's been like over 10 years at St. Thomas.
Yeah, well, thank you for the kind words, and clearly all that success. I think it starts institutionally, with our president and our athletic director, Phil Eston, President Julie Sullivan, and, Steve Fritz, who came before me as the head coach and was also our athletic director, and so many assistant coaches and players. And really they're, people, I think one of the two things we've always talked about in our program, one is daring to be great, and not shying away from saying our goal is to win a national championship. Now, we also know with 425 teams, the odds of doing that are pretty small. And even if you get to the national tournament, I look at our last 2 years in the national tournament, and we were in the top 5 or 10 both years, and we were sent on the road to Nebraska Wesleyan, who was number 1 in the country, and then on the road to Platteville when we were, I think, 4th, and they were 6th or 7th. And so, particularly in our region, I think there's a sense that once you get to the NCAA tournament, probably anybody you could play truly could beat anybody and get to the Final Four, but you could lose any given night. And so I think that dare to be great is important, but then we try to juxtapose that with sustainable excellence, and so we've been, I think, in a really competitive MIAC conference, able to, if you go back to Coach Fritz's tenure, past that 10 years, I think 14 of the last 15, we've won or shared. And I say that knowing that I think 6 teams from our conference have been in the national tournament this decade. So it really is a competitive conference, great coaches and players. But like anything, it's a journey, and I won't bore you with all the details, but I could go back to, 2004, our only losing season in the last 40. And I could tell you how that was really instrumental in where we got to in 05, 6, and 7. And then we hadn't been to a Sweet 16. And I think since my junior year in college, we went to the Final Four. And in 09, we beat Stevens Point. That was that bracket of death year, if you remember.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We were number 1 in the country, and we were playing number 4 Stevens Point in the second round, which is unbelievable, right? It would have been a great national championship game. And beating them, I thought, they had won a couple national titles before that. And I remember talking to Coach Semling after that. And I felt like that was a win for our program that got us to another level. But then we lost to WashU in the Elite Eight on the road, right? We were first in the country and got sent to Wheaton. And I think that was a learning lesson that helped the 2011 team. And so I could go through each one of those lessons from the previous decade and then how they served us well, culminating in a national title in 2016. But frankly, when you talk about our success over time, that's been far more important to us because I think it represents an institution and a program committed to excellence.
Yeah, and maybe the good move here to Division I is that I don't think you're ever going to see a bracket that looks like the Division III bracket, where in one quadrant of 16, that 8 of the top 10 teams in the country were there. And so when you make that Division I tournament, we're watching CBS and we see the bracket with the University of St. Thomas up there, I promise you, you will not have a bracket of death, Coach. That's a positive of this whole thing for me.
I appreciate that. And I'll tell you, I might eat those words, but if and when we do see our name up there, I will be thrilled. I won't be complaining about a bracket of death. We will be thrilled if we can get to that point. There's so much work that has to be done, but I do think one of the things we've learned in Division III is just the level of competitiveness. And again, what you see, all joking about the bracket of death aside, you knew in the Midwest that you were probably going to see a national title contender in the second round, if not before that, depending on where you were seated. And so I think we always felt that way, that the Final Four, if you can get there, it's a Herculean task, but if you can get there, we knew we'd see great teams there. We didn't think we were going to see markedly better teams than we had seen, along the way.
Well said. Following Illinois Wesleyan, I mean, the Titans' second round games over the years have been incredible. And it's just the way the bracket works out when you're in the central region or the West region states, the Wisconsin or Minnesota, crazy brackets, but you got to play them at some point, right? And it's almost the feeling that if you can get out of the Sweet 16 in that kind of bracket, you feel like the teams don't necessarily get any better as you move forward. It's kind of on par with who you faced in round 2 and 3. So very well said. I want to talk to you a little bit, Johnny, about why you're moving to Division One, because this is a unique story on so many fronts. And let's just start here. And you could go into as much detail, share as many thoughts as you want, but we're about 2 years removed. I think it was May of 19 from the University of St. Thomas basically getting kicked out of the MIAC. And let's just talk about where you stood for a second, because first of all, you were one of the 7 founding members of the conference. You were in great standing with the league. Now, here's kind of where things get interesting. You had won 12 all sports championships in a row. And no one can really pinpoint any other reason for you getting kicked out other than other schools in your league. Some of them, not all, some of them felt like they could no longer compete with the University of St. Thomas. Now, you're a little different school than the average Division III school, which might have 1,900, 1,800 students. You're a large school. I believe your enrollment's about 10,000. And some of the schools in your league felt like they could no longer compete across the board. Like maybe they could in men's basketball possibly, but not in football. Let's start with just looking back now 2 years later, how this is all played out with like getting kicked out of a league you were a founding member of.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's like 2 years and 2 days since that happened. And I think it was certainly, I think there are a lot of narratives out there, and I certainly can't speak for, and nor would I want to, for other schools or institutions or their administrators, but I think it was an interesting day at St. Thomas, certainly bittersweet in the sense that, everybody around here had been a Division III coach for some time. Many of us had competed in Division III. At the same time, I think it was a day that, when there's this great unknown, because truly at that time, I think people thought, well, the most logical thing is to go across the border and compete in the Wisconsin conference, which would have been really fascinating, right? When you look at the level of competition that would have brought, it would have been really exciting. And then there were a lot of people who thought that the Northern Sun, the Division II conference, that many of the teams are centered around Minnesota and surrounding states, that could have been a possibility. And so I don't think Division I was really something that people expected at that point, certainly. And that sort of happened later that summer. But yeah, it has been a whirlwind 2 years. When you think we're sitting here and we're ready to start Division I competition, 2 years later, it's, when you put it like that, it's pretty wild.
I imagine the answer to this is yes, and maybe it's not something you want to touch on, but university-wide, are there bad feelings for what went down in the MIAC? I have to believe that there's a lot of anger to what happened there. I mean, has it been a couple of years now where you can process this differently? What are your emotions around how that all played out?
Well, hey, the 5 stages of grief. I'll put my psychologist hat on. And I always tell our players, the quicker we get to acceptance, the better. We can go through denial and anger and bargaining and depression, and those are all valid. But at the end of the day, if we sit here and lament something like that, I don't think we're doing ourselves any good. And I think the thing that, for a long time, I had friends who'd ask me, don't you ever want to coach at the Division I level? And it really had never been an aspiration, only in the sense that I felt like I was the luckiest guy coaching at my alma mater at a school where I really felt like we could compete at the highest level in Division III while also recruiting outstanding student athletes. And so to me, it's never been about the level. It's about coaching at a school you believe in with people you love working with and helping young people through their journey. So I think certainly there were a lot of emotions when that initially happened, and we've had to work through a lot over the last 2 years, sort of that transition. If you talk about roster transitioning, I mean, there are a lot of things that have gone on in the last 2 years to prepare for this move. And so, I'd be lying if I didn't tell you there weren't mixed emotions around campus, but I do think, here we are 2 years later, I think the school is really galvanized and excited to say, look, we're going to do something that nobody else has ever done, right? No institutions jumped straight from Division III across
Right.
the board to Division I. And so to get the opportunity to do that, how often do you get to do that in life? That's what I keep telling my family, our players, etc. We get to work at the same school at this incredible institution, but we get to make this jump that is going to be really, really challenging, more so than we even know. But what an opportunity.
It is really unique. And just to think about St. Thomas as a Division III school, so everyone understands. I mean, the Tommies are the third winningest program in Division III history. So it's Wittenberg, Worcester, St. Thomas, Illinois Wesleyan, and Hope. And you've been to 4 Final Fours, and you've won 2 national titles, of which the remnants are sitting right behind you there. So St. Thomas isn't just a garden variety, middle of the road Division III school. That if you're creating a list of the top 10 Division III men's basketball programs ever, St. Thomas is right there on that list. So this is a big deal, coach, in Division III circles. And as someone that played for the Tommies, so you were a big part of great teams at St. Thomas in 94, 95. You led your alma mater to a 20-0 record in the MIAC. 93, 94, the year before, you led them to the NCAA tournament. All of this stuff combined, I mean, there's got to be a little bit of just, sadness looking back that you're leaving something that's been such a big part of your life.
Yeah, I think it's like any change. There's no question, Bob, that you look at the journey of life, right? And the older we get, the more history we have. And I think that journey has been one. I know for me, I go back further. My dad was a 1963 grad of St. Thomas. And so when you describe our enrollment now, and that includes the grad school as well, undergrad, we're about 6,500. If you go back when my dad was going here, it was a pretty sleepy little all-male college that sat sort of in the middle of nowhere. Not in the middle of nowhere, but it really is pretty incredible. So over the last 50 years, we went from a college to university. We became coeducational. Females started full-time here in 77. We opened a law school, a school of business, a college engineering, a 2-year school, now a school of health. And so when you look at all of that, I think one of the things that St. Thomas would say is kind of embodies our culture is this entrepreneurial spirit. And our business program is very small, very strong, but that entrepreneurial spirit, I guess when our board of trustees looks at our profile, right, and they say, who are the other Catholic schools around the country like us? Not that we want to be like anybody else, but who are the other similar schools? The schools, frankly, that come to mind more often are the Loyola Chicagos, Marquette, Villanova, Gonzaga, DePaul, Creighton. Right. You can go on. And those schools' profiles look a lot like St. Thomas. And so when people see Division I, I think they think only athletics, and it certainly is demarcating something different in athletics. But I think it's really probably more about our institution and what our board and our president, our athletic director see as sort of the vision for the next 50 years in St. Thomas history. So there's a certain part of nostalgia, but I don't know, I'm old enough where you sort of roll with the punches in life where you're like, yeah, that was a wonderful journey. And again, I could have been on that journey for another 20 years and been happy. I couldn't be more excited to be on the journey we're going on either.
It's a cool journey. And you mentioned earlier, when all this played out with the MIAC, there was a lot of different options or ideas, you could say. A lot of people thought, hey, they should go play in the MIAC. Stevens Point, Oshkosh, Whitewater, St. Thomas. I mean, easily competitively would have fit there. You mentioned the Division II conference that you would have fit in athletically, but something, I mean, unprecedented happened here, which is that you were given a waiver to go right from Division III to Division I by the Summit League. And let's just remind people who the schools are in the Summit League. So you have South Dakota State, South Dakota, North Dakota State, Oral Roberts, North Dakota, Kansas City, Western Illinois, Omaha, and Denver. So a really diverse group of schools there. And when this all shook up and you learned that the Summit League was saying yes, and the NCAA was saying yes, that must have been a pretty incredible moment to think that you were going to go from Division III to Division I.
Yeah, I think, and when you put it like that, absolutely. There probably were more moments along the way, right? There was the one May 22nd of 19 where we found out we were being removed from the MIAC. Then I think it was early October when the Summit League had invited us of 19. And so that was, I remember meeting with our players because that was, I think, 11 days before our season started, and explaining to them, hey, we, this looks like it's where we're headed. There were still no guarantees, right? Because the Summit League inviting us was different than the NCAA granting this waiver, which didn't happen until last July. So even then, we sort of played last season having a pretty good idea that this would be likely to happen. But like anything, there's no guarantees in life, right? I always tell our guys when they ask, Coach, what do you think is going to happen here? I usually start with human behaviors, human beings making decisions. I don't really know. I like studying it. I'm not great at predicting it all the time. And so we went through that year and really told our players, like, look, regardless of where we end up, the 1920 season, our focus is going to be solely on this team, right? This journey. And we'd be foolish to do anything other than that because we can't control what's going to happen down the road. Then that season was marred by COVID, right? So, and we may get into that a little bit, but in March of that season, COVID stops our season short as we're about to go play at St. John's in the Sweet 16. And then here we are 14 months later, and we get approved to go Division I in July, and other things have happened since then. But when you really look at the whirlwind of the last 2 years, and then you put COVID on top of that, it truly is pretty remarkable. And I will say this, the players we've coached, and I love coaching at St. Thomas for so many reasons, but the guys we've coached the last 2 years, I think have showed just so much class and resilience and grace during what I think for everyone in the world, but frankly, as a dad, for young people who have had to exert patience and make good decisions when sometimes as a young person, that's not always the easiest thing to do. And I just think our guys, the last 2 seasons, the way they've operated has been incredible. I mean, I don't think I could be prouder if we had won a national title. And I really felt like the last 2 years were as good as any teams we've ever had here. I'm not going to say better because that'll get all the alums. So I never compare the teams, but I always put them in a range of could a team have won a national title? And I think this year and last year were 2 teams that were as good as any teams we've had.
It's a shame the last couple tournaments were wiped out, or at least the first one was stopped midway, and then this one never happened. This year you finished ranked number 2 in the D3hoops.com poll. Randolph-Macon was 1, you were 2. Agree that this would have been an awesome year to see that tournament play out with you guys, with the Yeshiva story, Randolph-Macon, Trine, Illinois Wesleyan. Down the row would have been incredible to watch some of those matchups. The year before, there's still a bracket somewhere that never got completed that has the Johnnies and the Tommies sitting there ready to get to the Elite Eight. One of them was getting to the Elite Eight. I think they had beaten you 2 of 3, and this was going to be game 4. If I think everyone won on the opposing team's floor. Didn't you win at St. John's and they won at your place twice that year, something like that?
We won on each other's floor in the regular season. Then in the playoff, we had to flip a coin to decide.
Right.
There weren't, the tiebreakers didn't do it. So we had to flip a coin. We were both 19-1. They hosted, beat us in the playoffs. And then it would have been the 4th meeting, which the only time we played them previously in the national tournament was 1993, my sophomore year, where we played them 4 times. And happy to say we came out on top all 4 of those games that year. But I thought St. John's was as good as anyone in the country that year. I felt like we could play with anybody in the country, and the same thing this year. Josh Merkel at Randolph-Macon is a dear friend. Jason Zimmerman at Emory, who would have also had an incredible team. The 3 of us commiserated on a lot of Zoom calls over the year, just because we all felt like we had this group of guys who were incredibly committed and cohesive. And even then, how hard it is to win a national title. It's more about, can you be in that neighborhood where you feel like you have a chance with those elite teams? And that to me has been one of the fun parts over the last 21 years in Division III, is just getting to know the different coaches, the different programs. I think we played Stevens Point 12 times in about 10 years at one point, twice in the national tournament, but then we would just play them every year in the regular season. And it almost felt like a conference rivalry because we'd play them right before or after Christmas. And so those are things that I think those friendships and relationships and just the admiration we have for so many of those programs is something that certainly we'll miss, but I'll enjoy watching them compete from a distance.
Yeah, the 1920 bracket, I think most people agree that it was such a bummer for a million reasons that it got paused or shut down, because you had so many cool, you had like Yeshiva traveling to Randolph-Macon, Yeshiva's chance to prove that they're the real deal. You had Mount Union, which hadn't lost since like the first month of the year. You had the Tommies and the Johnnies. Pomona Pitzer flying to Elmhurst. You had WashU and North Central, the Central Region battle in Naperville. So you had all of these great matchups. And but it's a great point by you that on top of all this upheaval at St. Thomas athletically with the MIAC saying you had the COVID thing hit you. So you really have been through the ringer the last 2 years, Johnny. That's for sure.
Well, if you, and I look at our administration and what they've been able to do, right? Because we're focused on a basketball program. I look at Phil Eston and his team here at St. Thomas and what they've been doing, trying to provide our athletes every opportunity to compete. Our softball team just advanced to the World Series this weekend. Our baseball team just got #1 seed in their regional, all while keeping their eyes sort of on next year. It really has been, you're sort of trying to do two jobs at once, and doing all that during COVID has been challenging. But again, it's one of those things that I think we'll all look back and say we did the best we could. We didn't do a perfect job, but that's part of being on a team, right? Whether it's an athletic department or a men's basketball program. That part is what I felt like our players just did such a great, like this year we played Hamlin in game 1, and we had been through, it ended up being the longest season we've ever had. We started October 1st. I think we went 5.5 months and only played 7 games.
Right.
And we found out the night we played Hamlin in game 1, and we had a really good win to start the year. And we found out that night that the national tournament had been canceled. And I remember that locker room over in Hamlin, that was a lot of wind out of our guys' sails, because we have a lot of seniors and juniors who have worked towards a national championship or a chance to win it. And so, again, everybody in society has been through more important things than basketball games. And I think our guys were very empathic towards that throughout it.
Let's talk about the logistics here of how this works now. And I know this is a broader thing than men's basketball, but we're talking men's basketball, so we'll kind of keep it there. But clearly, as someone that's seen the highest levels of Division III, I know for sure that a great Division III team can go into one of the Summit League teams and give them a real game and or beat them. There's plenty of teams on that list that you can say, hey, a Division III team in the top 5 or 10 is good enough to compete there, but not good enough to compete over the course of a conference schedule. So you've got to take your program from where it is now to some other level. And I just want to first ask you logistically, Coach, about the scholarships. So you've got a bunch of really good Division III players, great Division III players, actually, including All-Americans on your roster. They're not on scholarship. Do they all of a sudden become scholarship players? When could you start offering scholarships? Just talk us through how the logistics of this whole thing works in terms of the roster and scholarships.
Yeah, so, and that's a great question, because it isn't one that anybody has ever encountered, right? So for example, Division I men's basketball, 13 is the maximum number of scholarships you can give. Now, I think during COVID, there are some exceptions right now for next year. But like Bellarmine, for example, who's a Division II program, really great program and coach. They went Division I last year, and Coach Davenport had said in Division II, a lot of times you can sort of stack academic aid and athletic aid.
Right.
And so you can sometimes have, even though there's only 10 basketball scholarships as the maximum in Division II, you could in theory have 15 or 17 guys on the equivalent of a full scholarship through different types of aid. we're in a unique spot because none of our guys are on athletic scholarships.
Right.
And so we'll be building that out over a few years. And so it is going to be a fascinating mix where we'll have our Division III players who are not on scholarship. We're bringing in some guys on scholarship next year. And then we'll be bringing in more than the following year. And so it really has been, in terms of managing the roster and trying to help everybody land in the right spot, which is impossible to do, but it's certainly something we tried. That, for example, we've had a junior varsity at St. Thomas for the last 40 years. We didn't have a JV this year by design. We didn't bring in freshmen this year by design, because we thought this move was going to happen, even though a year ago we didn't know for certain. So last year during the high school season, we weren't recruiting guys because we didn't think we were going to have a junior varsity. So we'll be bringing probably 7, 8, 9 of our current players with us next year, and there'll probably be 6 or 7 new guys next year. And over, the next 3 or 4 years, that roster will turn over. But I think you hit on a number of variables that are, things that we talk about in our staff meetings every day. How do we do this in a way that our guys are really good at the Division III level? You can say we can play with teams, Bob. I'm certainly not. I have no idea how we're going to do against anybody. What I do know is our guys are getting a chance to, for decades, people have said, how good are the best Division III players, right? And could they play at Division I? And certainly there are examples of guys who have done that with small data points. I think that's something that's really exciting for our guys to get a chance to do that against some great teams. I mean, everybody saw Oral Roberts this year advance to the Sweet 16. North Dakota State and South Dakota State have been really pretty dominant in the Summit League the last decade. And so there are 6 other great teams. I mean, when I look at the Summit League Conference, we're going to be very tested. And if you've watched us play in Division III, our athletic director, Phil Eston, came from Penn State, and he and I graduated from St. Thomas together in 1995. So we've known each other a long time. But he got here, and I think his first full year here, we had 1 dunk. We were 26-3, and we had 1 dunk. And he's like, so where are all the guys that dunk? And I was like, well, we're small, but we shoot it well. He's like, what happens if you don't shoot very well some night? I'm like, we're probably going to lose. We're going to get butts kicked. I think we will certainly get bigger, but I think our culture and the way we play and what we believe in and our values, right? And the values start at the top of the institution. You look at a mission statement, you look at your athletic department. And to me, that's what makes me feel the best about all this, is just knowing what President Sullivan and Phil Eston feel about this move, is that it should actually enhance the overall university. This is not a, let's go be really good at sports and see what happens. This is the right thing for St. Thomas long-term, not this week, not this month or year. And so I think as we're building out our roster, we're trying to be very aware of that as well, that this is not about how many games do we win in year one. It's how do we take our Division III culture, implement that in Division I, and recruit different types of players who admittedly will be bigger and stronger, I hope. But, our players, I think, smart, skilled, tough, unselfish. Those are the 4 things I always come back to that we want in players. And so I'm really excited for our returning guys because I think they've been through so much. And so the guys who are coming with us are really, really pumped.
So you've got the returning guys, the Division III guys that return and play for you are not on scholarship, but then you do have some incoming freshmen next season that will be scholarship recruits, I think I hear, and then you'll continue to recruit scholarship players moving forward. I'm curious of your current mix, because you had a great team. You finished ranked number 2 in the country, undefeated. I'm just curious if all of these guys return. You've got Anders Nelson, 19 points a game, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, a stud, an All-American type player. Riley Miller, an All-American, 19 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Parker Bjorklund, I think I'm pronouncing that right, 13 and 6. Bert Hedstrom, 10, 4, and 3. That nucleus of 4 guys right there. I think the only senior there is Hedstrom. Do they all return for you next year? I'm just curious who comes back.
Yeah, the intent, all those guys. And then, Ryan Lindbergh is another guy who has really started for 4 years. Ryan doesn't score that much, but he's He's been our best defender. I think he led the country in assist to turnover ratio 2 years ago. So those were our 5 starters this year. We expect they'll all be back. And Ryan and Bert would be 5th-year students going to grad school next year. But yeah, it's a, just those 5 alone, and there will be a couple others. But if you look, Anders was the National Freshman of the Year.
Yeah.
Riley this year was an All-American and shot 62% on threes with a 10-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And so those two, we've had some great guards here. Those two have been just incredible to watch and coach, and not just see them as individuals, but also the synergy. That Anders is the National Freshman of the Year, and Riley, not very many people knew about him coming out of high school. In fact, I don't think he was ranked in the top 200 seniors in the state of Minnesota. And you look at the two of them and how they've kind of grown together. And then Ryan and Bert have been these wings that their freshman year was the only year we haven't won the MIAC in the last 15. So it was a little bit of a bumpy season. And I look at what they've done their last 3 years. I think we finished ranked 11th, 4th, and 2nd in the country as their last 3 years. And each of them is just a brilliant, Bert's a 3.98 student. He's won every academic award you could. And when he committed to St. Thomas, he said, Coach, I want to come here for 2 reasons. Your engineering program is incredible, and I know it's going to serve me well, and I want to win a national championship. And that's sort of just the laser focus that he has in his life. And so this, not getting a chance the last 2 years was really difficult for him. But we're thrilled that those guys are coming back. And then Parker Bjorklund, you talk about a classic story. He didn't play college basketball his first 2 years. He was running some side businesses and was making good money. And I think he's a business major, one of the more creative entrepreneurial guys we've ever seen. So we recruited him out of high school, but he just chose not to play for 2 years and then called us this summer and said, would it be okay if I tried out for the team? And we were like, well, sure, but COVID's here. We're not sure what kind of season. Well, he came out, and I joked with you about having 1 dunk last year in 2019-20. He exceeded that, I think, in his first 30 seconds of practice. Probably as athletic a kid as we've had the last decade. And after not playing college basketball, he came out and not only did he put up those numbers, I think he shot 75% from the field and I mean, he's a brilliant kid, but he didn't really know what he was doing because we only played 7 games. So what he did in those 7 games, we talk a lot. And when I talk about what this team could have been this year, part of it is that a kid like Parker and then his backup, Will Ingles, who also shot 75% on twos, they were a platoon at the 5-man that were just, it was different than what we've had previously. Last year we had Tommy Anderson and Elijah Hanna, who were undersized 5-men, and they were 2nd and 3rd in the conference in points per minute. Well, this year Will and Parker combined to average 21 and 12 on 75% from the field. And so, again, I think all these guys, I could go on and on about this year's team, but I think their enthusiasm for making this jump to the Summit League and doing everything they can is really exciting.
That's really cool that you've got that nucleus returning that's able to help you through this transition to Division I. Really interested to see how those guys play. And I'm pretty confident that they're going to hold their own in the Summit League. I want to ask you a little bit about just expectations around winning and losing, because if you go backwards, we read the statistics from your 10 years, and we know the statistics from Steve Fritz's tenure at University of St. Thomas. And I don't know if we went back 30 years here, Johnny, how many losing seasons there have been? Of one or two, maybe something like that.
There's been one since 1980. I know that. So,
you're heading into a deal here where it's different than what you've been used to. You're used to going into a season saying something like, our goals are to win the MIAC and to win the conference tournament, to make the NCAA tournament, and to make a deep run in Division III. And next year, look, you guys could conceivably win 5 games. You could go 5-20 or something like that. And you could do that for a couple of years just as you figure this out. How do you adjust your mindset from what you've been so used to for so many years as a coach, assistant coach, and player?
That's a good question. Get a good psychologist, a good sports psychologist to help me. The way you put it, I think, Bob, is really appropriate because there's an expectation of success here at St. Thomas. I think we all know, this jump is enormous, and I think it's trying to balance a healthy competitiveness of we're going to do everything we can to be the best we possibly can, with also really not knowing, right? And I think that's the other part of it. There aren't necessarily a lot of metrics. If we were a Division II school moving forward with 10 or 15 scholarship guys, you could look at the Bellarmins and the Cal Baptists and the Merrimacs, and we've studied all those programs, but this is certainly different. And I think I know this, we're not going to put a number on number of wins that's going to define success next year, the following year, and the following year. I think we are going to look for, is our culture sustaining itself, right? And that's hard to measure, and I often joke that you can see great programs that have great culture. You can see great programs that don't have great culture. It's hard to know the programs that are losing all the time if they have great culture, because frankly, if everybody's happy when you're losing, I don't know if that's a good thing either. And so I think it's a fascinating question. I think I can probably answer it better in a year or two, but I don't think we're going to be tied to wins and losses as did we succeed. But I do think there's going to be a general, are we playing smart? Are we playing tough? Are we taking care of the ball? Are we preventing other teams from easy baskets? Those things that as you think about the building blocks of a program and the things that give you a chance to win, I think those are going to be really important because you're absolutely right. We're going to be going against teams that have done this for a long, long time at the Division I level. Some of them having national tournament experience, and so I'm kind of a numbers geek, and I love quantitative analyses. I find myself talking next year more about qualitative things that we're gonna try to hold on to.
I wanted to ask about your staff and one person in particular as you make this move. And a name that jumps off the page is Mike Maker. And that name will ring a bell to all Division III fans because before he was the head coach at Division I Marist from 2014 to 2018, he was the head coach at Williams from 2008 to 2014, I believe. And I think they went to about 3 Final Fours in that span. I think Coach Maker would have recruited and had Duncan Robinson. I think that was 2014 that Duncan Robinson was a freshman at that Final Four where they lost to Whitewater. And so how did you pull that off, Coach, getting Mike Maker on your staff? That seems like a coup.
I think it is. It's a really long story that you may not want all of it, but I can tell you this. Mike and I, so we started running some version, Coach Beeline's offense at West Virginia, I became fascinated with in about 2005. And during those years, who happened to be a young assistant coach there, relatively young, Mike Maker. I didn't know that. I didn't know Mike at all, but I just watched this team play. And that was a time where we had Isaac Roosevelt, who was a 2-time All-American, Mike Keating, who's been my top assistant the last decade, Brian Schnettler, who was an All-American shooting guard. So the way they played, I just thought fit us well. And we've run different versions of that over the last 15 years. So Coach Maker, the first time I saw his team play was in the 2011 Final Four, and we were playing Middlebury. They were playing Worcester, and we were watching his team play the first half, and I think they were up 18 when we went to the locker room, 17 or 18. And Worcester came back and beat them in a thriller. But I remember watching Williams, and I'm like, okay, that looks like basketball and art kind of being merged to me, just how beautifully they played. Fast forward 2 years, 2013, we play them in the Elite Eight, and we escaped with a win. It was, again, one of those games that I think our depth and pressure wore them down a little bit. The first 20 minutes, it looked to me like they were playing horse. We were ranked number 1 in the country, and I'm like, guys, they just keep shooting open shots. I mean, it was absurd. And so Coach Maker and I, again, we exchanged pleasantries, and I told him then, I think they got the best offensive team I've ever coached against. 2014, I flip on the Final Four. We had lost to Augustana, and I see Duncan Robinson come off a screen and shoot like a 26-footer early against Amherst in the Final Four. And I was like, hold on, who in the world is that? Like, there's some, even on a small TV or a computer screen, I was like, that does not look like the normal Division III player. And so fast forward, they lose to Whitewater at the buzzer. Mike had one of the more epic, I think, careers at Williams. He goes to Marist, and the kind of person he is, he probably could have gotten, Duncan will say to this day that had Mike stayed at Williams, Duncan jokes that he would have stayed at Williams and he'd be in like some low-level pro league over in Europe right now. No knock on Williams, just the trajectory he would have been on. Mike connected him with Coach Beeline, and said this was the right fit for you, and convinced both of them it would be worth talking. And sort of the rest is history. Well, Mike went to Marist for 4 years, and when he left there, his wife is from St. Olaf College. My wife's from St. Olaf. In fact, my wife Chancey and his wife Erica graduated from St. Olaf in 2004 together, and they knew each other. They were friends, acquaintances. So what a small world. And he and Mike and his wife Erica have been living in Northfield for the last 3 years, and so we become great friends. And he just starts hanging around our practice. He gives me ideas, suggestions. We're much better offensively because of the stuff he's done. And then as this happened, that we were going to Division I, we started talking because he was going to take 2 years off, and then he was going to find his next coaching gig. And his family loves it here. So fast forward, he and I just had continuing talks, and he was actually on our staff as a volunteer assistant this past season, and will be the associate head coach coming up next season. So really, really excited about that.
That's incredibly cool. And what a valuable addition to your staff as you make this huge move, for all the perspective that he has on different levels, including Division I and Division III, and understanding what that jump means, because not everyone would quite understand what the jump means. I also wanted to ask you, as we start to kind of wrap this up, just a few more things. First, I want to go the personal route for a second. You mentioned your wife, and who graduated from St. Olaf, and Chancey, you've made very public on social media her battle with breast cancer. And the last things that I've seen you kind of tweet out, it seemed like things sounded, to me at least, like they were much more positive, and she was doing very well. How is Chancey doing in her battle with cancer?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, she is she's one of the more incredible people you could ever meet, and I'm admittedly biased, but she actually suffered from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma 3 years ago. So in 2018, she was diagnosed with that, and that was the chemo, and inpatient chemo was really pretty gruesome. But she battled through, and then last June, as she was sort of getting clean scans for that, they did sort of a family history, just prevented. And honestly, during COVID, they were going to skip the mammogram because of COVID. And she kind of has this. She co-founded a charter school 8 years ago. Like, she's the kind of person who just, when she decides she's going to do something, she's going to do it. And so she just felt in her gut, she's like, I really think I should have this mammogram, even though it's COVID. And so she was persistent, and sadly, they diagnosed her with breast cancer last June. And so she went through, radiation, chemo, double mastectomy. I mean, it's been a really difficult 10 months for her and us. But the prognosis is good, and she's, she's getting better and better every day. She's just a person who's vibrant, and much of the last 3 years has not had that same energy, understandably. And so, she's just, when you meet that person who they're ready to take on all life challenges, and she's been working this school she started 8 years ago. She works. At one point, a doctor asked her, do you think it's healthy that you're working this much? Because she's sitting in chemo hooked up to that, and she's on her computer for 12 straight hours, and she's just like, trust me, you wouldn't like me if I wasn't busy, because I'd be a mess. So I appreciate you asking, but yeah, she's, I think the prognosis is good.
That's great. And certainly everyone in the Division III community has been following that very closely. Thank you for making that something that we could, share in. And certainly we wish her well. I'm glad to hear that things are going so well. The other cool thing that you guys have going on is that you have a new addition to your family coming soon. We mentioned that you're going to officially be Division I on July 1st. Well, before then, you're going to have an addition to your family. And this is really a cool story. Tell me if I have this right. Chancey's best friend, who lives in like the Pacific Northwest somewhere, maybe Seattle, is a surrogate carrier for your baby, which is due in June. It's a girl. What an incredible story. Just talk through a little bit about kind of how this came about and how you're feeling about this, and the crazy turn your life is about to take in June.
How am I feeling? It depends on the day. I think, Chancey, when she was diagnosed the first time with cancer, she knew that there was a chance she wouldn't be able to bear children which had always been, I think, a dream of hers. And so then the second bout kind of delayed things further. And when she was diagnosed last June, her friend Lauren from Seattle called her immediately and was like, I want to carry yours and John's child. So, just an incredible gift her and her husband have given us. So we're going out to Seattle this weekend, actually, so our boys can meet them. And then the baby will be here sometime next month. So Chancey will stay out there for probably the next 6 weeks. I'll be back here. But yeah, it's one of those, again, when you talk about the journey of life, and I don't know, the older you get, the less you try to control, I think, and the more you're just like, you know what, this is what living's about. But I also joke that, people will talk about midlife crises, and with us going Division I and having a new baby and all the other stuff going on in life, I'm like, I don't need anything else. I just, let's put our head down, get to work. And to have a little baby girl, I've got boys, but I think it's going to be an incredible experience. And so we appreciate everyone's support. People have been so, I think, kind throughout just Chancey's journey through cancer, and then also this. And so appreciate it.
You're giving us a lot to follow you guys through the next, we've got a lot going on here, Johnny. I mean, there's a lot happening, including your son, Jack, is going to a Division III school to play basketball. So he is committed to St. Norbert, which is a phenomenal program. Talk a little bit about Jack's decision to pick Division III. And I know that he was getting recruited across a lot of Division III schools, maybe higher, but just talk about that fit at St. Norbert for him.
Yeah, you're not a very good recruiter when you can't get your own son to come play for you, right? And frankly, his dream all along, and probably mine, had been that he'd play for us at St. Thomas. And who knows how that would have gone, right? In terms of, he knows the level of competition, but I think that had always been the goal. And so when this happened, he and I had to have a number of frank talks about what it would look like if he came to St. Thomas, and he would have a spot on the team, but his chances for playing were, significantly smaller than they would be at the Division III level. And so it was one of those interesting, a number of father-son conversations over the course of the year, just candid. What does he want? What do I want? And I really tried to stay out of it for him, because I would love him to have come to St. Thomas, but not if his goal is to work his way into a rotation someday. And I think St. Norbert's, Gary, it's interesting. We played them in our second to I guess their last Division III game that they've played, because they didn't play last year, but in the first round of the national tournament. And I just have so much respect for Gary. I mean, it was fun looking at several schools with Jack, because I basically was like, look at these guys you're talking to are incredible coaches. Wherever you pick, if it's not St. Thomas, I think you're going to play for a better coach than if you came to play for your dad. And there's no doubt that's the case with Gary. Their president, Ryan Brees, is also a dear friend of ours. His wife, Carol, taught at St. Thomas for over 20 years. And so when we visited St. Norbert, I think he just felt a certain, some similarities to St. Thomas, but also being away from home. And, he had a great run. Their team lost in the state championship this year to one of our former players. Brian Schneller was the coach on the other team. Brian used to babysit Jack and Adam when they were young. And there was a moment at the end of the game where Adam hugged Jack as he came out of the game, just as a dad. That was, one of those things that you look at and you're like, all the times they fought out in the backyard. It's like, here they are sharing this great run, but a tough loss together. And so it's been a wild year, but really, I think St. Norbert is a great fit for him, and very excited for him to play under Gary.
And how ironic that for, 10, heck, 20 years, going back to your assistant days, you're bringing these talented kids to St. Thomas as recruits, good enough to play higher, and you're selling them that, come play for our program, because you can get on the floor here as a Division III, and you're going to sit on the bench at Division II and I. Your own son comes along, and all of a sudden that works in reverse, and St. Norbert is the better fit than your own program, because now you're Division I. That's a circle of life kind of moment, isn't it, Johnny?
It really is. And it was why I tried to stay out of it, because I did not want to push him to St. Thomas, but I also didn't want him to feel like he didn't I didn't want him here either. So I sort of told him, here's what I think the opportunities would be at each school, and then let him ask questions. And, at the end of the day, you just want your kids to be happy and sort of chase their dreams. And what I said at the very outset of the podcast, like if you're doing something you love around people you really admire, I think that's a great thing. And when I look at him going to St. Norbert's, that feels really good as a dad, knowing he's going to a place where I think he'll be challenged and he'll grow in all sorts of ways.
Well, mark my words, March 2025, Jack Tower going to be playing in like an Elite Eight Division III game on a Saturday night, and dad's going to be coaching in some big game to get into the conference tournament in the Summit. And so I can't wait to see if this kind of thing plays out as his career at St. Norbert progresses and you're building in the Summit. That's going to be pretty cool to watch.
It will be an exciting journey. And as I've told him, Gary's going to teach him a heck of a lot more about defense than I ever did. So there's no doubt he's going to a place where he's going to learn a lot. And, what you highlighted, I think, just the relationships across Division III, that's the records are great. The championships are great. But when you look at just the kid, we just had commencement here at St. Thomas this past weekend, and 4 of our seniors graduated. And just to think about what they've done over the last 4 years and the ways they've grown, that matters a lot more than the points they've scored or the games we've won. And so I know your support of Division III and your passion for it, Bob, I think is really incredible. And it's something that I appreciate, because I think these young people are in it for such great reasons, and the things they go on to do after graduation are really remarkable. And so your work and the work that the D3 Hoops guys do promoting this, I think is it's really pretty inspirational just to see from a distance.
Yeah, much appreciated. I think that all of us are just trying to make sure that people understand how talented Division III student athletes are, how great the opportunity is, how great the schools are. And as long as people know that, whatever decision they make is great. I think there's a lot of forces out there, as you know, that try to diminish the opportunity at Division III. And you just watch some of these games play out, and this better than I do, but Division III kids can play and that extremely well. They could play at a very high level. And I think we're going to find that out when some of your D3 guys get a crack at the Summit League next year. Just a final question for you, then I'll give you the last word. Kind of building on this, what will you miss the most about Division III? Your whole life, we could say, your current job, the job as the assistant, your role as a student athlete, most of your life has been tied up in Division III. What will you miss the most about Division III?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm not going to say the kids, because we're going to get to work with great kids in Division I, right? So I don't think that's going to change. Our travel is going to be much different, right? Our 20 conference games, there were only 2 of them that were more than 75 minutes away. So,
right.
There were not many nights that we weren't home by 10:30. But I'm a night owl. I don't mind travel. Like, I don't think that part's going to be that tough. I think the biggest thing, it will be the rivalries, like the friendly rivalries, and then what you talked about, sort of the sectional NCAA games. Like, I think back to our Elite Eight games at Augustana in 2011 and 2016, where what you're talking about, the high level players that are out there, and knowing, like any competitive kind of cauldron, what those players have done to get to an Elite Eight game, right? And there's 425 teams, and now it's down to 8. But if you lose, you're done. If you win, you go to the Final Four. I think those moments where you're in a game and it's sold out as the guys are walking out for warmups, I think those certainly will be things that will be hard to replicate, because let's hope down the road, and we can't for several years by NCAA rules playing the national tournament, but let's hope down the road we're in those games. But I think that will be a different feeling. And I think the other part is just the friendships and relationships that over time, the people you talk to on a regular basis, coaches from other conferences, I think those will take time to build in the Division I world. Because again, I think so many of the things, like when I look around my office, and we're going to keep getting great kids here who are really good students and really good people, and we're working at St. Thomas. So certain things are changing. The bus rides are going to be longer. But I think it's sort of that, just the history, where I could bore you for days with you know, you brought up Illinois Wesleyan. I remember us playing them in 2011 in a second round game. We were
Yep.
looking at them the night before when they played River Falls, and we're like, how is that an opening round game where Illinois Wesleyan is playing River Falls? And
Right.
then we play the winner of that, and then we got the reward of playing the defending national champs, Stevens Point.
Right.
And then we played Augustana on their court in the Elite Eight. And that was all to get to the Final Four and play Middlebury and Worcester. So I think back to those journeys, and each season is really like a story. And we're just going to be, it's going to be a different story, a different book, but I think equally exciting.
Well, I'll give you the final word. Just a couple final on my thought is certainly St. Thomas leaves Division III as one of the top men's basketball programs of all time. We talked about the stats earlier. It's going to be very strange to see a bracket and not see the Tommies in there. Just always a fixture in the bracket, always a fixture making deep runs, and certainly a fixture atop the MIAC, along with the Johnnies and several other of the great teams in the MIAC. So we'll miss following your program in Division III. You guys have been a great member. You guys have done it the right way. You've been the prototypical group of student athletes on the floor and how your team has conducted itself. So kudos to you guys. You will be missed. And I'll give you any final words that you have for those tuning in, Coach.
Well, first off, Bob, thank you for those kind words. And I think when you say it like that, it means a lot. I remember coming to St. Thomas games when I was 6 years old with my dad, and we lived 5 minutes from here. And so when I go back to my memories of St. Thomas basketball, and there were some years in the 80s where they were not a power, and then there was a really good run, and then there was kind of a dip, and then we've had this latest run. And so, I think we're very appreciative of knowing how competitive it is. I was fortunate to play for Steve Fritz and to be an assistant coach under him. And his values and integrity, and I think the way he modeled how we want to play the game, we've tried to carry over. But I can tell you that it's always been humbling, because I was sort of a kid that when I got here at St. Thomas, I didn't know if I'd be good enough to play here. And so I sort of look back and I look at my son, Jack, where he's at now at age 18. And it brings me back to some of the doubts I probably had in the fall of 91, thinking, I wonder if I'll ever be good enough to play here. And, here we are 30 years later, and we've had a pretty good run. And so many of the elite teams you've talked about, to be mentioned in the same breath as them, we've worked really hard to try to do that and have a program that people are proud of. And I think the last thing is just thank everybody in Division III, coaches, players, administrators, and all the guys at D3 Hoops, because it's been, to me, D3 Hoops, I tell Pat and Dave this a lot as well, it's really brought people together. Where I remember being a grad student at Wisconsin in the late 90s, and it had just started, and I was transfixed by it. Like, what is this thing that all of a sudden I can follow all these games? And so I look at what that has done for Division III hoops, and I'm not just saying this to Pat, you and Dave and Pat and all these guys in the back. I think it's brought the whole country together in a way that, Division III, the landscape is a pretty special one, with really healthy rivalries and a great perspective on what's important in life. And we certainly feel like Division I moving there, we're not going to lose that, but we do hope you guys all follow us, and maybe some of the teams that cheered against the Tommies in Division III will now say, hey, you know what, we can pull for them now that they're in Division I. They need some additional support.
And when we need, these D1 exhibition games. So when Coach Rose calls you up and says, we would like to play an exhibition. I mean, I hope that would be a thing where we could drive up to Minneapolis or St. Paul and get that done, Johnny. Let's don't forget about us.
I've seen Coach Rose's lineup going into this year. They look like a Division I team, frankly. But yes, we certainly have a lot of people who have jokingly said they'd love to be on that list. So it'll be fun, hopefully, to stay connected to people that way as well.
Well, that's Johnny Tower, the head men's basketball coach of the University of St. Thomas Tommies, as they prepare to make the unprecedented transition from NCAA Division III to Division I. Coach, you've given me a ton of time. Love the fact we got a chance to cover a lot of different things today. Best of luck to you in your personal life, all the things that you have going on that are incredibly exciting, as well as with the Tommies. We wish you nothing but the best, and we're going to be rooting for you guys.
Thanks very much, Bob. Great to talk with you, and let's stay in touch. Appreciate it.
Thanks.